Hi everyone, my name is Kobe. Today I'm going to be talking about Olympic rifle and a lot of the equipment that is involved with this sport. So I'm making this video coming off the heels of the 2024 Paris Olympics, and after those games there has been a lot of focus on the Olympic shooting sports. A lot of it is from the famous picture of the air pistol shooter who's basically just holding his gun out like that. So at its very core, at its very base, rifle is a bullseye-based shooting sport, which means that the entire objective is to hit the center of this target as many times as you can. For air rifle or small bore rifle, a standard course of fire, which means how many shots you shoot, will be 60. Within each of these bullseyes, there are 10 rings, the lowest ring being a 1 and the highest ring being a 10. If you hit the 10 ring every single time, you will get a perfect score of 600 out of 600 points. When we are talking about the Olympics, the level that those athletes are shooting at, they are basically hitting the 10 ring every single shot. So to further distinguish between the different skill levels of the athletes, they use a decimal scoring system. So within the different scoring rings, there will be a 0.0, 0.1, 0.2, all the way going up to a 0.9. So in theory, you could have a perfect shot, dead center, that is a 10.9. And the closer you are to having a 10.9 every single shot, the higher you will be on that podium. So this is what we would call an air rifle target, a 10-meter air rifle target. So there are 12 aiming bulls on this paper. The 2 in the center are what we call sighter targets. That's what we use to zero our sights in before we start shooting our record fire, which is all the surrounding bulls. When we look at the Olympics or a lot of ISSF shooting competitions, they will not be using paper targets. They will mostly be shooting on electronically scored targets. So it's like a big metal box with microphones in it, and the microphones are able to pick up where the shot impacts on the target. So to give you some context of how small the 10 ring is on one of these air rifle targets, let me show it to you. A 10 will be hitting this center dot. The circle around it is a 9, and then around that you can see the 8, 7, 6, and lower scoring rings. So you can imagine how small this looks when you are 10 meters away from it, which is about 33 feet. You absolutely cannot see the aiming rings within the center of the bullseye. Okay, so I wanted to take this opportunity to show the target up close, as well as some of the ammo that we shoot. So this is a 177 caliber 4.5 millimeter wad cutter pellet. These are RWS R10s. But to give you an idea, if you place this pellet right over the center of the bullseye like that, this would be considered like a deep 10. That would be something like a 10.7 or maybe a 10.8. So a pretty good high scoring 10. If we are to move it over to the edge, like that, where we can still see the dot, that's considered a 9. So just to give you an idea, that's a 10. That's a 9. There's hardly any difference. But if you have a shot that's like this, especially if you are competing at that very high level, this would be considered a disastrous shot. This would take you out of contention for the podium. If you have a shot like this, where the edge of it is just touching the 10, that might be considered like a 10.0 or 10.1. So it would not be considered an X, but you at least have that 10 integer score. Now, let's say that that's your shot and you take a follow-up shot where it is also just barely scraping, the edge of that 10 dot. So each of these pellets is 4.5 millimeters in diameter. If you put two of these shots together, that's going to be about 9 millimeters edge to edge. So just try to imagine being 10 meters away from these targets and shooting 60 shots into a hole, okay, that is no bigger than 9 millimeters edge to edge. That is the level of precision that you need to be very competitive in a sport like rifle. Now, you may be wondering why Olympic rifle shooters hold the gun like this. And the short answer is that it's for maximum stability. We want to use our skeleton to hold up the entire weight of the rifle. This is because we don't want to use our muscles and fatigue ourselves. If we hold a rifle up using our muscles, then eventually those muscles are going to tire out, especially over long periods of time, and we're going to shake a lot. And it will be absolutely impossible to hit such a small target if we are shaking a lot. When we look at Olympic rifles, there's virtually no recoil to them. So there's no need for us to drive the rifle back into, a shooting position. We can simply let the weight of the gun drive itself. So when we look at Olympic firearms, we need to keep in mind that they are purpose-built to be match rifles. They are not built to be general-purpose rifles that we take out into the field. They are meant to be super accurate and super adjustable to fit our bodies perfectly. So, they're going to have a lot of features on them that we wouldn't see on a typical hunting rifle or a tactical rifle. Okay, so now that we understand, just how small these targets are and really what it takes to be competitive, I wanted to go over the gun. So this is a 10-meter air rifle. This one is an Anschutz 9015 in a one stock. Now there are about 5 major Olympic rifle manufacturers. The top 5 that come to mind would be Feinwerkbau, Walther, Anschutz, Steyr, and Pardini. And between all 5 of those brands, I would really say that all of them make an extremely high quality product, an extremely precise rifle. If you were to take any of those rifles and put them in a vise and aim them perfectly dead center at one of these aiming blacks, they would all be capable of shooting a perfect 600 out of 600 integer score. What really makes the difference between these rifles is how they fit the shooter. When we talk about the rifles fitting the shooter, that is such it is such a vital part of rifle. Because the targets are so small, even the slightest movement, slightest error when you're aiming is going to throw your shot way off course. And it's going to get you an undesirable result. So it is to the shooter's best interest to find, the perfect rifle and stock combination to fit their individual bodies. Certain manufacturers like Walther will make lighter rifles, so those would be more popular with, smaller framed shooters or more petite individuals. A lot of women prefer Walthers. For me, since I'm a little bit more stocky and short, I prefer a heavier rifle that has a shorter length of pull and a shorter sight radius. So something like this Anschutz will have a stainless steel barrel and a very large side cocking action that centers a lot of that weight over my center of gravity. Okay, so this is a close-up of my one stock. I would say the most complex portion of this gun is in the back. If we turn the gun upright, you can see that the butt plate and the cheek piece is actually offset from the center line of the gun. This is so that when you're in the standing position, or when I'm in the standing position, I should say, I can get behind the rear sight a little bit easier and keep the gun a little bit straighter. Typical on all Olympic rifles will be a highly adjustable butt plate. You need an adjustable butt plate so that it fits your shooting suit perfectly. Most shooters will shoot with this butt plate at its lowest position so that you can hold the gun up very straight. Something else that you're going to find on Olympic rifles are like a lot of personalized weights so that you can rebalance the balance point of the gun. This gun has an adjustable cheek piece so that you can dial it up or down, just depending on, how much cheek pressure you need. You can also move it back and forth. Those are my rear sight. So my rear sight is offset. It is offset to the right side since I'm a left-handed shooter. My rear sight also has the ability to cant, so that if I cant the rifle into myself to change the point of balance, I can do that. This is what we call a palm rest. This is what our support hand uses when we pick up the gun. There is a T-rail on the bottom. This is so that you can either stack another palm rest on here or maybe put a bipod if you have to stand the gun up. It has a carbon fiber barrel sleeve that protects the air cylinder. You can also attach sliding weights to this to further rebalance the gun. I need a lighter gun, so I took off all the weights. They sell similar barrel weights that'll fit up here. I took all of them off on my gun, and then at the very top of the gun we have the front sight. Again, it's offset to match the rear sight, and it's on top a riser of equal height. This is what we call a sight extension, so it can actually slide backwards or forward on this stainless barrel jacket to increase our sight radius. The reason we would want to increase our sight radius, or the distance between the front and rear sight, is to give ourselves a finer adjustment with the rear sight. Also, the further forward your front sight is, the more movement you're going to be able to distinguish in your front aperture. This is my front sight. So when you look through it, you can see the front aperture. So basically, you want to put the aiming black in the center of the aiming aperture. When it is perfectly centered with an equal distance of white around the black, that's when you're going to take your shot. Typically on these Olympic rifles, you'll use an adjustable front aperture. So right now I have mine set to 4.1, but I can dial this down and make my aiming center a little bit smaller. Typically for standing, I like to leave my aiming center a little bit larger at between a 4.1 and 4.2. On this particular front sight, I can also adjust the ring thickness. So right now it's set to be very thin, But if I look through it and I adjust it, I can make everything, you know, just a little bit thicker. When we look at the rear sight, this is what we call a blinder. So when we're looking through the sights, I look through with my left eye since I'm a left-handed shooter. My non-aiming eye will remain open so as to reduce the muscle tension in my face. So I use a blinder to, you know, obstruct my non-aiming eye. If you look through it, you can see our front sight. If we were aiming at the target, you know, you would see a aiming black in the center of that front sight. But as you can see, there is no magnification whatsoever. This is what we call an adjustable rear iris. So with this, you can dial it up and down to change the diameter of the hole. This one is set up with a polarization filter so that you have a clearer sight picture. They do sell iris with adjustable color filters so that you can adjust the rear sight for different lighting conditions. This is your elevation turret. So basically, on this rear sight, this is an Anschutz 7002. So about 20 of these clicks will move you one ring. So let's say that my pellets were impacting at the bottom of the 9 ring. I would want to click this, you know, 20 clicks up. And the same goes for my windage. Okay, so I want to take a few moments to show the trigger. So something that I don't think people talk about enough is how light these triggers are. So basically, this is a 2-stage trigger. So this is the first stage. We hit the wall, and if we pull through it, that's our trigger break. Now, when we're talking about these Olympic rifles, your trigger weight is measured in ounces, not pounds. Something like this would be like a 25-ounce trigger. Upon watching the video, I realized that I said 25 ounces. I meant to say 2.5 ounces. The gun is outfitted with a dry fire device, which is what I had the gun set to. If I flip this switch, now we engage live fire. I'm going to expel air. So if I go to pull the trigger, see that one more time. And just to show how incredibly light this trigger is, I'm going to try to set it off with this very small Allen wrench. There's our first stage. Okay, so that was my brief overview of some of the adjustable features on this gun. Obviously, different makes and models will have different adjustments. Certain guns will even have things like electronic triggers or palm rests that will cant and swivel back and forth. But basically what I'm trying to get at is that in a sport like Olympic rifle, consistency is king. The shooter who is able to, repeat their position time and time again, shot after shot, match after match, that will be the shooter who makes the podium every time. They will have tons of medals. The more external factors you are able to eliminate from shooting, such as, muscle fatigue or any sort of strain that you might have, the more stable you will be, the more consistently you will be able to get back into position every single time. Even as your heart is beating very fast, under match intensity. Something that I should also mention that is a tremendous help is your coach. So all like high-level rifle shooters will have some sort of coach assisting them, with their training. It is extremely helpful to have someone who can actually watch you shoot and is able to help you make these little adjustments to your position to get rid of these external factors. So something that I used to do when I was going to college, I was the rifle team manager for the University of Nevada, Reno, UNR. So what my job was that in the morning at our 5 a.m. practice, I would go down to the air rifle range with the team, and as they were shooting, I would walk the firing line. And if any shooter needed, a little adjustment to be made to their equipment, or if I saw something that, I could help them with, I would take the rifle and make the adjustment for them. Now, having someone like that or a coach who can actually help adjust your equipment as you're on the firing line is extremely helpful. When you're suited up in the shooting suit, it's really hard to move, and you have reduced fine motor movement, especially when it comes to tightening screws or cutting things down to make them perfect for yourself. Okay, so I wanted to take a moment to go over a more simplistic rifle stock. So this is an Anschutz 1903. It's one of their 64, match 64 based actions. But this is in basically what they call a junior stock. So they call it that because, it's meant to train juniors. It's meant to train people who have never shot a gun before. It's a wood stock, so it's a little bit lighter. The grip on it is ambidextrous, so that you can train either a right-handed or left-handed shooter. It still maintains some basic stock adjustment features, like an adjustable length of pull, an adjustable butt plate height, and even an adjustable cheek piece. When you compare a stock like this to a purpose-built competition stock like the one, it's pretty obvious that there's fewer adjustments. Now, that's not to say that this is a bad stock. These are these basic adjustments that you have back here. They're really all you need to train yourself on the fundamentals of marksmanship. But if you want to get to the next level, if you want to get to the level that they're shooting at in the Olympics, that's when you really, really are going to need a personalized, fit rifle stock like the one. Now, that's not to say that it is impossible for someone to get to that level using one of these guns, but it will be very much to their advantage to have something better that is more personalized to their body shape than using a general purpose stock like this. Okay, so one more thing that I wanted to touch on is the personalization of these rifles. So if you watch any high-level rifle competition, be it the Olympics, ISSF, NCAA, or even a high school match, it will not be uncommon to see rifles that have been absolutely butchered up with tape or epoxy putty or moleskin going over the cheek pieces. Something that you need to keep in mind is that even though these Olympic firearms are beautiful and they are constructed out of wonderful materials, their primary function to a competitor is as a tool that they are going to use to win medals. And, having an aesthetically pleasing rifle or a rifle that has a lot of resale value, that isn't really going to help them win. What is going to help them win is, tangible things like these markers where it tells you where to put your hand, or putty that helps you have a more consistent grip, or even a rougher cheek piece that will give you more traction when you're swinging. So at this point in the video, something that I should address is that although these guns look super customizable and we can pretty much fit them perfect to our bodies, there is a written set of rules which limit certain dimensions on the gun. So those rules would be written by the ISSF, and basically they govern things like how low our palm rest can be, the maximum height of our sights, the distance between our front and rear sight, the weight of the rifle, and there's like a lot of, dimensional things that we have to keep in mind when we're fitting the gun, even down to how far offset our butt plate is from the center line of the gun. There are quite a few rules that govern these guns, so it is the responsibility of the athlete's coach to be aware of what all of them are so that they can make the gun legal for competition. And basically those rules are in place to ensure fair play between all of the athletes. Whenever you go to a major shooting competition, especially a rifle one, the first thing that the competitors are going to have to do before they start shooting is go through what's called equipment control. And basically it's when you take all of the equipment that you're going to use in that competition through a series of officials that are experts on the rules, and they're going to inspect it to make sure that whatever you're bringing onto the firing line complies with the written rules. So they're going to be checking things like how tight your jacket is, how tight your shooting pants are. They're going to measure different dimensions of the gun to make sure that you're within the rules. And if all of your equipment passes, then usually what they'll do is they'll put a sticker on your gun or your jacket that says you passed equipment control on that particular day. And something that they do to enforce that equipment control is that when you're done shooting, they may or may not pick you for a random secondary equipment inspection. And pretty much if they do that, your equipment should be able to pass that second time around if it passed the first time. If your equipment doesn't pass on that second inspection, then you could be DQ'd, or you might be scrutinized harder by those officials. Okay, so that's pretty much everything you need to know about 10-meter air rifle. But for rifle athletes, that's just one half of the equation. The other half is shooting 50-meter smallbore rifle. So as its name implies, the distance between the firing line and the target in the Olympics is 50 meters. If we're talking about smallbore rifle for NCAA, NCAA shoots at a reduced distance 50-foot target. And although it would be more ideal to shoot at a 50-meter target all the time, the reality is that most shooting clubs and school teams do not have access to a large 50-meter range. So as a compromise, the 50-foot smallbore target was created. If you look at this target compared to an air rifle target, they pretty much look the same. The major difference is, of course, the distance that you're shooting at. So you can imagine how small this target looks at 33 feet. This target will look even smaller at 50 feet. And of course, you cannot see the aiming rings, when you're behind the firing line at 50 feet. Smallbore rifle will be shot in 3 shooting positions, whereas air rifle is only shot in the standing position. So for smallbore, we shoot 20 shots in kneeling, 20 shots in prone, and 20 shots in standing for a total integer score of 600 points. In the Olympics, they do use a decimal scoring system just like air rifle, although typically for smallbore, the scores will not be as high as it is for air rifle. I would say that between the two guns, small bore is the more difficult shooting discipline because the target is further away from you. Also, you have to master shooting in 3 shooting positions, whereas air rifle, you're just shooting and standing. Fundamentally, you are using the same skills for small bore that you use for air rifle. You need to use, the structure, the skeletal structure of your body to hold up the gun so that you don't fatigue yourself. And in the kneeling and prone positions, you will use a shooting sling like this. Basically, this integrates into your shooting jacket and it goes around your support arm like this. And it will hook up to the bottom of your rifle so that you can have a supported shooting position in kneeling and prone. So for small bore, the ammo that we shoot is 22 long rifle. The most common type of 22 long rifle that you'll see is of the match variety. So companies like Ely, Lapua, RWS. For small bore, just like air rifle, you're only allowed to use metallic sights, so there is no magnification allowed. There are set rules for small bore, as there are for air rifle, and you do need these guns to go through equipment control the same way that the air rifles do. So now I'm going to go into some major differences between the small bore rifle and the air rifle. For small bore, we are allowed to do a little bit more modifications to the gun than the air rifle. The first major modification difference would be the use of a butt plate hook. So basically what this does is that it goes on the end of your gun like that, and the benefit of using a hook butt plate is that when you're in standing, this will go under your shooting arm, and when you're holding the rifle like this, your trigger hand can be very relaxed so that you have maximum sensitivity with your trigger finger. The hook and the butt plate should support the rear weight of the gun. Another major difference would be the use of a palm rest like this. So basically, this can screw into your T-slot rail like that. And when you're shooting offhand or in standing, this basically allows your support arm to be dropped so that you have more skeletal support holding the gun. Another major difference is the allowance of a longer sight radius. Having a very long sight radius like this would be very useful when you're in a stable position like prone, so that you can distinguish more fine front sight movement. Basically, the way that we extend the front sight is with the use of something like this. This is called a bloop tube or a sight extension. So all this does is it clamps onto the muzzle of your gun, and there's a dovetail rail on the top for your front sight to slide onto. This particular bloop tube has a barrel tuner on it, so you can screw this forward or backwards to adjust your barrel harmonics. That's basically so that you can further tune the ammunition to your gun. Now, some people might say, oh, well, that looks like a suppressor. It's not. If you look down the middle, it's completely hollow. There's no baffles or anything that would suppress sound. I have noticed that when you shoot these guns indoors, if it has a tube on it, it does sound slightly different, but it really does nothing to a muzzle that report. Sometimes having the extra weight on the front of the gun will also help to reduce, muzzle flip. The last major different part of the gun would be this. So I kind of went over this earlier. You have a sling, but it connects to a sling stop like this. So there's a little QD socket, you push it in, it detaches. Then you would attach this under your rail so that when you're in the sling positions, your hand can ride against the hand stop. Something that used to be very common in small bore is actually taking in a second set of metallic sights into your competition. So the whole reason you would want a second set of sights is if you use different riser heights between the different shooting positions. As of 2024, I'm pretty sure that the ISSF discontinued allowing athletes to do this. So most of them will just go in with one set of sights. When I was shooting, this was a pretty common practice. So you would have basically one set of sights set up for standing, where you might have a lot of sight risers and a shorter sight radius. And you would have a separate set of sights for prone and kneeling, where you would have a longer sight radius and typically fewer height risers. Another thing that we should talk about when it comes to the small bore rifles is their need to be rapidly adjustable between positions. So unlike air rifle, where the gun just has to be set up for one static position, small bore, you have to first set it up to be shot in kneeling, then you set it up to be shot in prone, and then in standing. And the gun will fit vastly different in your body depending on if you're laying down or standing up. In between the shooting positions, we do have a couple minutes to make these adjustments. However, it is definitely not enough time for you to take the gun off the line, put it on a bench, and get a set of tools to make all of those desired adjustments. So on a good quality stock like this Anschutz, it has these two huge adjustment knobs in the back. So let's say that between prone and standing, I'm gonna have to adjust my cheek piece. All I'm gonna do is loosen the adjustment knob, and now I can raise or lower the cheek piece to get my optimal settings. You could do the same thing with the butt plate on this gun. Loosening this, you can extend or retract the butt plate. If you look at a gun like this 1907, another feature that it will have is a very long accessory rail on the bottom. This is important because when you go to sling up the gun, your hand may go very far forward when you're lying down. If you look at something like the air rifles, something like this that is specifically made for standing, the accessory rail will be really small. It's specifically made, just for that standing position. And there's really no quick adjustment methods with this type of stock. Everything will use these countersunk screws, and you're going to need a separate set of tools to make those adjustments. This is going to need to be put on the bench. So between air rifle and small bore rifle, air rifle is the newer shooting discipline. It became very popular in the early 2000s when pre-charged pneumatic air rifles with high quality regulators became more commonplace. Small bore rifles have been around much longer, and really if a company was making a small bore rifle during that time, then they pretty much started also producing air rifles. Similar to the air rifles we discussed earlier, if you bought a barreled action from any of the major small bore companies and you put it in a vise and aimed it at the target perfectly, you would be capable of shooting a perfect 600 out of 600 integer score at 50 meters. Of course, doing this in an indoor range with no conditions. When we look at the different types of small bore rifles that are available, most companies will have 3 different tiers. They would have a junior rifle, like that 1903 we saw earlier. They will have an intermediate rifle like this 1907, and they will have a top tier aluminum position rifle. So to give you an idea of what something like that would look like, I have my Anschutz 1913 over here. So right now it's set up for F-class mini PAMA shooting. This would not be legal for international 3-piece shooting because of the scope and some of the additional modifications that I've done to it. But just to give you an idea, this is like what one of those high-end chassis-based guns would look like. Much like air rifle, your major manufacturers of small bore rifles will be Walther, Feinwerkbau, Anschutz, and then you have Bleicher and Grinig. I would say that among those 5 brands, you will see a much larger price difference between their small bore rifles than you will their air rifles. To give you an idea, a top tier air rifle like this 9015 or a top tier air rifle like a LG 500 or a 900X, those are all going to be around the $5,000 to $6,000 range. For small bore rifles, for a top tier like Anschutz, Walther, or Feinwerkbau, you might be looking at a $7,000 to $8,000 range. For the Grinigs and the Bleichers, you're going to be looking at somewhere in the 5-digit range. Now, you might be wondering, well, why would I pay more for those 2 makes than the other 3 makes if they're all the same quality? A major part of the small bore rifle that we look at, and this is going to sound really odd, but it is actually the distance between where the chamber is and where our triggers are. And the whole reason we're looking at that is because when we are in a sling position, like prone, and we go to load the rifle, we're going to have to, open the action, take our bullet, and then we're going to have to reach and shove the bullet into the chamber, and then close the bolt, and then shoot. In a sport like rifle where, you're trying to be as consistent as possible, having to break position every time you load the gun will lead to a lot of inconsistencies. And it's going to make you, take more time between your shots because you're going to have to reset your shooting position. If you have a gun where the chamber is very close to the trigger, all you have to do is, open your bolt, take your bullet, throw it into the chamber, close your bolt, and you can get back into the shooting position. You don't have to break position with your elbow. When we talk about guns like the Bleichers and the Grinigs, something that they specialize in is having the chamber, very close to the trigger. If you watch a lot of these international matches, the top shooters will all be using those guns. Like Anschutz, Walther, and Feinwerkbau have all made guns to compete against, those 2 actions. But from what I've seen, the people who are still making the podiums are all using something like a Bleicher. If we're just talking about shooting these guns at 50 feet, like we do in NCAA, you're not really going to see a difference accuracy-wise between the 5 different manufacturers. When we start stretching out the distance to that 50-meter distance, or even 100-yard distance if you shoot NRA disciplines, that's when you're really going to start to see the more expensive guns be more consistent. And I know I said earlier that all of these guns are capable of shooting a perfect score. The difference will be how many of those shots are X's and how many are just, regular 10s. Of course, you do have to do all these tests with like very high quality ammo. If you use, a lesser quality ammo, that will lead to more inconsistencies with the small bore rifles. While we're on the subject of ammunition, something that we will do with our small bore rifles, especially if you're competing at a very high level, is that you will send your gun out to get bullet tested. So, for example, there's a bullet testing center in Arizona. You might, drive out there or send them your gun, and what they're going to do is mount it in a machine rest and shoot like 10 round groups through the gun using different lot number ammunition. During these tests, they're going to use their best quality ammo, but what we're looking for is which particular lot of that ammo does well through the gun. So if we took something like this Ely and we looked at these numbers on the front of it, we can see the velocity as well as the lot number. So when we find a velocity and lot number that groups particularly well through our guns, we are going to buy quite a bit of that ammo. We might buy like an entire case. And we do that so that we can train and go to matches with the same quality ammunition. There are similar ammunition testing services for the pellets, although doing it for the pellets is significantly cheaper than doing it for the small bore ammunition. A box of like high quality match ammo for 22, that's going to run you about $20 for a box of 50, whereas for something like these R10s, you might be looking around $15 to $16 for a tin of 500 rounds. And you would purchase it in a sleeve like this. Okay, so that's pretty much everything that you need to know about the guns. There is a little bit more equipment that we use, so I'll show that off now. This is what we call an offhand stand, and the whole point of this thing is so that when we're shooting and standing, we have something to rest the gun on, because it does get really tiring to hold one of these guns up for 60 shots. Typically, the offhand stands will have a little tray like this where we can put our pellets, and they'll have like a little platform for the rifle. So basically, like if I were shooting, my rifle when I'm resting would be like this, and when I go to shoot, I would just pick it up and get into my position. Then when I'm done, come down to rest it. Obviously, you cannot shoot off of the rest. That's totally against the rules. And if you are shooting at a traditional paper target, like one of these, obviously, you cannot see the bullet holes when you're at distance. So the way that we do that is we have a spotting scope on a stand like this. We'll set it up right next to our offhand stand. So as we're resting the gun in between shots, or after we take the shot, we can look through our spotting scope, see where our bullets impacted, and then make whatever adjustments we need to make to our shooting position or to our sights so that we hit the center of the target. Another major part of our shooting equipment will be the shooting jacket and the shooting pants. So I don't have a set of those on me right now, but typically they're going to be made out of leather or canvas, and it goes over your body. Underneath those shooting jackets and pants, you'll usually wear a set of leggings. Some people opt to wear a sweater to fill in the excess space. Off-the-shelf suits are available in like standard sizes. Those will usually run about $350 for a full set. If you look at what they're using at the very high levels of shooting, especially like in college and the Olympics, those would be what we call custom suits. So there are like shooting suit manufacturers, and they'll give you a list of dimensions that they need to get from you. You'll measure yourself, you'll send it into them, and like a couple months later, they'll give you back a custom fit shooting suit. And those are really cool because, you know, you can pick the colors that your suit is. If you're on a specific shooting team, there might be letters going down the back to represent your team. I think it's really cool if you're able to put your country on it as well. We also wear these. These are shooting boots. So basically, these are meant to hold your feet in place so that you don't rock back or forth. Unlike regular walking shoes, the bottom of these shoes are completely flat. So if we're on the ground, it's not going to move. It laces up right above our ankles so that everything is held still. Some shooting boots like these will have a traction device in the back. This is so that when we're kneeling and small bore, there's a place for us to sit and build a more stable shooting position. Now, of course, it's not required that you have all of that, jacket and pants, boots for shooting, but at the very high levels, you're pretty much not going to see anyone on the line missing one of these important pieces of equipment. Another function of the shooting jackets and pants is to prevent back injuries. These rifles are pretty heavy. The small bore rifles are going to be around 12 pounds, and like the position rifles will be even more. Okay, so if you're still watching at this point in the video, you're probably thinking to yourself, well, geez, that equipment seems awfully expensive. I don't know if this is really the sport for me. And if I'm being completely honest, rifle is a really expensive sport. If you look at, my competitors that are at the top of their game, a lot of times they will have that equipment because they're a sponsored shooter, or there might be some sort of national entity that is paying for their equipment. There are few people who can, obtain that level, that status to become basically a sponsored shooter. But what I'm going to show you are some, what I think are a little bit more affordable options, just so that, you can try your hand at this type of shooting. So the first thing that comes to my mind will be a sporter air rifle like this. This is a Crosman Challenger CH 2021. So a lot of high schools, especially ones that have gyro OTC programs, will have some sort of shooting program. In that shooting program, they shoot what's called sporter air rifle. So it's basically 3-position air rifle. You are shooting at the same sized targets as the precision rifles. However, you don't use a heavy shooting suit or pants, and pretty much everyone who shoots sporter will use, one of like 5 CMP approved sporter air guns. This CH 2021, this is pretty much going to be the de facto rifle that all of those programs use. Something like this can be had for around $600, and it shoots the same .177 caliber air rifle ammunition that the other gun shoots. Scoring is done the same way as well. In sporter, you're going to shoot kneeling, prone, and standing. Again, for a total score of 600 points. If you are lucky enough to live somewhere where there is a small bore shooting club, you may want to consider getting something like this to start out. This is a Marlin 2000L. So Marlin doesn't make this gun anymore, but you can find like used variations of this for like sub $500. On this gun, I did put a set of diopter sights so that it's shootable as a small bore rifle. I like this gun because it has that T-rail on the bottom for a sling stop. Other options for small bore would include, finding a club that might shoot something like Mini Palma or perhaps small bore silhouette. Between all of these shooting disciplines, you will, get the same fundamentals of marksmanship practice that you would shooting a 50 meter or 50 foot 3-position rifle. The final option that I have is opting to shoot something like service rifle. So this is a service rifle that I use. Basically, it's the upper receiver is made by White Oak Armament, and I just threw this onto an arrow lower with a Magpul UBR stock. Service rifle, it's another marksmanship-based shooting discipline, but I mean, really, all you're going to need for this is the gun, and you can pretty much buy any basic AR lower and then just slap the match upper on top of it. Service rifle does use what's called an NRA shooting coat, which is a little bit more affordable than the international style 3-piece shooting coats. But again, for service rifle, fundamentals are the same. When you're in standing, you're using the skeletal structure of your body to shoot the gun rather than using your muscles. Okay, so to wrap up the video, I thought that I'd cover this. This, I guess, is a controversial subject, but why is rifle included in the Olympics? And why is it considered a sport when you have so many more physically demanding sports that include running, throwing a ball, swimming? Well, I would say that, much like those other sports, especially, when you're competing at that very high world-class level, you need to have a certain amount of discipline. Discipline to train, and then basically to dedicate your life towards achieving, a certain goal. So, like, really good rifle shooters will usually start competing when they're 11 to 13 years old, and they will shoot through high school, shoot through college. Maybe they'll be part of like a national shooting program after college, and then when they're in their early 20s, in their prime, they will, go through selection to be selected for those very high level matches. It's very, very few people ever make it to that level. If you find someone who has made it to that level, you should really talk to them. They have some awesome stories. To give you an idea, the way that I started shooting was through my high school. So we had a sporter air rifle team in the fall, and in the winter we had precision air rifle shooting. Basically, our practice schedule was that from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. after school, you would go down to the school cafeteria, help set up all of the air rifle range and targets. Then you would, practice shooting. You would either practice shooting for group size in like a different position, or you would practice shooting like a simulated match. On Fridays, we would typically do some sort of physical training, so we would do some sort of cardio workout and then a weight room workout. After that, we'd again have to set up the cafeteria in preparation to host the air rifle match on Saturday. When I was attending UNR, the rifle team practices would be at 5 a.m. in the morning. And yes, you heard that right. Rifle practices were at 5 a.m. And that seems ridiculous to some people, and I totally get why, but The whole reason, why we did that was so that the entire team could practice at one time. And, you would actually see other people on the firing line shooting against you. So the way that, something like that would work, everyone starts off shooting air rifle. The best air rifle shooters would be selected for the travel team. And, those travel team members would also practice shooting small bore. At that level, it was possible to send, an air rifle shooter specialist and a small bore rifle shooting specialist, but typically the way it works is that if you have to send 6 people to a match, if you can get away with it, you only want to send 6 people. Logistically, it's easier, and honestly, it saves you a plane ticket. When I was at UNR, the rifle team did have to do a physical, workout as well in addition to shooting. So there'd be a cardio workout and a weight room workout as well. Okay, so getting back on topic, why do I think rifle should be considered a sport? Something that is very hard to describe to people, especially those who have never shot competitively before, is, the amount of stress you're under, especially at a high level competition. And I think that stress level is pretty much the same no matter what sport you do. When you're on the firing line, in the moment, during the match, your heart will be beating a lot faster. Really, it's because I spent all this time practicing, I don't want to screw up. Or I have shot, this score so far, all I have to do is hit 3 more points and then we win. You're placing all that pressure to win on yourself. And unlike other sports where, you have teammates that can kind of back you up in case you fail, for rifle, whether you succeed or lose is all based on you. Everyone is doing the same thing as you, and there's no safety net. Well, why do I think rifle should be considered a sport? The amount of discipline that you spend, practicing to hit this super small target, the amount of composure that you need to overcome these nerves during a match, and, your ability to pull everything together to execute a perfect performance under extremely high levels of stress that's why I think rifle should be considered in an Olympic sport equal with anything else. Well, if you're still watching this very long video, I thank you for watching to the end. I hope that you found this video informative, and I hope that it answered a lot of the questions you might have about rifle.